But if you make it illegal, they're not even going to imagine. They're not even going to try. So Detroit they have defeated congestion. They do not have a problem with congestion. And they're continuing on a path there. Plus, they're now planning on turning about half the city into a farm. So they'll have even less congestion. So the battle has been won. But you look at the places that have congestion, those are the places that are just, the incomes in Manhattan. And it's good for poor people to have the congestion like they have in these big cities. If you live in New York City, in the poorest neighborhood in the city, in Hunts Point, in Bronx, and my sister lives in the Bronx, but not in the poorest neighborhood. But if you live in Hunts Point, you can get on the #2 IRT, and 25 minutes later, you're in Wall Street, which has the highest jobs per square mile of any place in North America. And so you've got hope. But if you live on 6 Mile Road and Woodward Avenue in Detroit, you can take a bus which comes about every half hour during rush hour and every hour off-peak hour, and you get to the city limits of Detroit, the bus route ends because the suburbs don't want anything to do with Detroit. And so then there might be a bus on the other side, there might not, there might be a job broker who comes by with a van and picks you up and takes you out, but you are isolated, you're toast. But they keep building more. I said they built every road they imagined. They haven't. The Michigan DOT still has another one. They want to connect the Ren Center with the Jefferson Expressway. And they say that we need it for jobs, so that people can go on this job. It's absurd. Over half the people in these neighborhoods in Detroit don't even have a car. And the idea that, so anyway, it's an example. That's the most extreme example where a narrow concern, battling congestion. Now, traditionally, city streets in an urban neighborhood, going back to the ancient Romans or the Persians or anybody, the street had 3 functions. Movement, so the vehicles, the chariots, the wagons, whatever. That's one of them, and they got that one. But the other 2 are really important too. The market, selling merchandise, commerce, which would be your Front Street, that kind of thing. And social. It's the place where you meet. You can meet people spontaneously. The thing that Buddy was talking about, where you actually run into people and you create a relationship with them, interact with them. That's what cities can do, and that's what the commercial streets in a city ought to do. 3 things, not 1 thing. But it's been dumbed down to 1 thing by the fetish of battling congestion. And so if you look at these things, it's all really part of one whole problem. And that is, you need to embrace the complexity of the city. Figure out what you love about your city and replicate it. Allow urbanism to happen. And at the CNU, that's what we try to do. We're for urbanism, the Congress for New Urbanism. It doesn't even have to be new urbanism. The only reason we put that name in there, new, was because cities were so stigmatized. We were trying to restore urbanism, but we couldn't just say Congress for urbanism. We would if we were starting over today. We're for urbanism, and we're fighting for it on lots of fronts, including Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, HUD's FHA program, the 221D4 multiple family housing program, all of which make mixed-use buildings almost impossible to finance and have made Main Street virtually illegal all over the country. And so you can't repeat Front Street. You can't build it again. I saw, what's that shopping center where they're trying to turn it into a city? Mayfair. Okay, so we look there, and there's housing above a few of the stores, but those housing units are not eligible for Fannie, Freddie, or the 221D4 program. So it limited how much the developer was able to do. And those things need to change so you can build the kind of beautiful places that make your heart sing. And right now that's not the case. It's really hard to replace this stuff. It shouldn't be hard. It should be easy. It should be as of right. It should be something that a small developer can do without having to hire a lawyer. It should be something that can happen. And if Wilmington builds, and it's still a growing city, So, you know, I mean, still, it's a place that's popular and it's going to grow even more. So that's a good thing. And that growth can turn this city into something that is fabulous. That's the best, that attracts people from all over, in all kinds of commerce, including manufacturing. It can all be part of it. Manufacturers like to be near cool stuff too. You don't have to just be about Richard Florida's coffee shop. And so that's what I would say about Wilmington. Embrace the complexity of the city, embrace the things about the city you love, and that'll lead you in the right direction. And add value. That's the unifying theme that can happen in Wilmington, that can bring the more conservative people and the more pro-environmental kind of people, like the captain that was captaining our boats before. Yes. You know, it can bring everybody together. If the common goal is to add value, then you can argue about what adds the most value, but at least you want to add value to the city. And that can be something that can lead to greater achievement and greater consensus. Thank you. Anybody have any questions before you start eating? Or start eating and ask questions anyway. Anybody have anything?
I'm going to, as such a fan of Milwaukee, and we talked about it once, and we'll bring it up again. My visit to the International Downtown Association in Milwaukee in 2009, I was struck by the balance of historic preservation and just killer contemporary architecture mixed in with it. And you said, we don't want to create a museum, but we actually want to encourage it. How do you encourage that contemporary architecture with the NIMBYs that are out there freaking out that it doesn't look historic?
Well, I mean, if you wanted to do something like that over here, or which,
yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right.
In the pre-Civil War historic district, there's a strong argument that it would be inappropriate. Or if it was done, it would need to be done much more carefully. But we were talking about a warehouse district south of Milwaukee, where actually a lot of places in Milwaukee, but we don't have quite the precious historic fabric. I mean, it's more of a we didn't have an historic district that would be like what you have here, or like is in Charleston. So, I'm not saying we should just allow anything to be done. What mattered was the building envelopes, the scale, the fenestration, how the buildings faced and addressed the street. Those are all things you can do with contemporary buildings. So, we wouldn't allow a contemporary drive-through in this warehouse district because we want the buildings up on the street. So if somebody wanted to build a, McDonald's with a big drive-through in this neighborhood, it wasn't going to happen. But if somebody wanted to build a 12-story apartment building and use glass and steel and not try to replicate, the building types of 100 years before, that's fine. And it added value, and it actually looks good next to the older stuff. So the people that, after they saw what we were talking about, they were happy with it. The people that owned the existing building, and the historic preservationists were fairly happy with it. So, it depends on the situation. Yeah.
When you meet with the planners and the civic leaders tomorrow,
yeah, I will.
You know what I would say? Don't tell them I told you this. Okay. But there's many people who come to Wilmington from other markets. They try to do a project and they can never get it done. And anyone who completes one here from another market typically leaves and goes somewhere.
Doesn't come back.
Doesn't come back.
Okay,
It's
well,
a very difficult town.
But our planners don't believe that.
Okay, well, I'll tell them a story tomorrow that I'll tell you right now real quick. When I was elected, the public works director, who I kept around for a year or two after I got in, before I replaced him, he came in with $58 million worth of right turn lane improvements, what he called improvements, which involved, in some of the money was to tear down buildings, you know, to speed up the traffic at the intersections. So he came in, I looked at the plan, and he had these other guys with him, the 3 or 4 other engineers with him. I said, look, I have a question for you. How many of you guys are planning on drawing on your pensions after you retire from the city of Milwaukee? And they looked at me funny and went, oh, of course we are. I said, well then why do you want to tear down the tax base that's going to pay your pension? I mean, what are you getting out of it? It's not adding value. You're tearing down a building, so what? So some guy in the suburbs can drive home faster? I don't quite get it. What are you trying to accomplish here? You need to add value to Milwaukee. You know, that's who you work for. You don't work for Fox Point. You're working for Milwaukee. So we kept, we had 2 or 3 other meetings. Finally they got it. Okay, we add value. That means we don't tear down buildings to put in right turn lanes. You know, those buildings pay taxes. So, you know, I mean, I think that's something that can get the planners and traffic engineers, is that their job is to work for the betterment of the community that they're working for. Their job is not to try to assume what would North Carolina DOT think was good for us to do without consequence. Who cares what happens to Wilmington? As long as the guy at the FHWA office in Raleigh is happy, I've done my job. You know, I mean, that was the sort of thing that they didn't quite get. So, you know, that's what it's this add value thing. I mean, I'll tell them about their pension. You know, do you want to undermine the value of your pension by doing all these crappy things that undermine the value of Wilmington, or do you want to add value?
But John, I think the issue, I do believe our planners recognize that one of their jobs is to help encourage an increased tax base. The developer is supposed to make a profit, and the project itself should make the community better. I don't disagree that our community, I believe our planners and leaders recognize that. What I think has been the challenge is they want everything to be so perfect, and they want it to be exactly, perfectly right. And in doing so, they have basically prescriptively created guidelines that I can never get close.
Maybe it's not all of them. Maybe it's because neighborhood complaints.
Sure.
You know, I mean, that's how zoning codes go bad when you have one problem after another. And it affects one part of town, they pass it for the whole city. And it's like a bad roof. You just keep putting shingles on top of it. So, you know, saying it's just their obstinacy, which could be true in some cases, but, you know, you need to give them a little.
They want to be very protective of what they have, but in the meantime, we've seen zero development. Private, really, even during our heyday of the last 10 years, we only really saw less than $100 million of private development. I mean, that's not a lot of development for a city our size.
Yeah, no, I mean, you want the developers doing the right thing, infilling, and feeling really happy about what they're doing. You don't owe them a profit, but you at least can create a situation where if they do the right thing, you're going to get a shot at it. Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess I'll eat myself.
Yes, I mean, yes, I do.
You know, okay, what days?
I need to go to work weeks because I can't make any time. Do I need water while I'm up?
Maybe.
It's fresh.